Well, today we are going to talk about an episode that is very heavy because it mentions Darth Vader from planet Vulcan.
I should have picked that.
Welcome, everybody. And for this episode, we have one of my favorite podcasts. We have Chrisi from Madison on the Air. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
It is a pleasure to have you here. And we have been trying to get her on the show for a while, but our schedules, they don't quite work out. So I'm really happy to finally get you on today.
I'm glad to
So-
be here. Yeah.
For all of our listeners who don't know about you, can you tell us a little about your show and where they can find you?
So my show, Madison on the Air, is an audio drama. So a little departure from your world, but it is pretty much. I'm on every podcast platform. We're on YouTube. It is a comedy, even though we call ourselves audio dramas. We do have comedies over here. This is modern day girl is zapped into old time radio shows. No technology, no Starbucks, and no one is PC. Will she survive? And
No.
even though, we are kind of sci-fi because she's a time traveler,
Yes.
which is perfect for this film we'll be talking about today.
And Ray, I have to tell you that's my excuse for listening to the show. It's time traveling. Yeah,
Yep,
sci-fi.
fair enough.
Totally on genre. Totally.
So for all of you out there who have not heard of this show before, you can pause us now, go download it, listen to it. We'll be waiting. So, should we go for our first segment?
Define science fiction remnant.
And on this segment, you know the drill. We ask you if you love sci-fi, you know someone who loves sci-fi, but they have not heard our show. How would you describe them? How would you describe us to them? And I usually post these questions on occasionally through Twitter, so you could respond to those, but you don't have to wait for me to post. Just reach out to us, and you could be on our next episode. So today I got 3 entries. One is coming from bringing the voice to the world, and the comment is very, very, very small. And I like to hear what Ray has to say on this one. He says, smarter than average. Very short and simple. I'm assuming he's talking about typical podcasts about sci-fi. I take it.
Can't hurt to be smarter than average.
Yeah. I mean, we go off the rails a lot, but yeah.
There were rails? I never saw the rails.
Where you're going, you don't need rails. Oh,
That's
I'm
right.
tipping it. I'm tipping it.
That's no, sorry, you can't use that one. That's the third movie. You got to stick with the first one.
Oh, you're right. You're right. My bad.
Awesome. The second one comes from Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. It is a podcast all about Star Wars. And I do listen to that podcast. I kind of like what they have to say coming from a Star Trek perspective. Scarif
On the
says,
planet Vulcan.
You mix Star Wars and Star Trek, and I'm all there.
That was probably actually the first crossover meme ever. You know how there's hundreds of them on the internet now? That was
You
probably
heard
the
it
first
here,
one.
1985. Well, Scarif says, it's like hanging at 10 forward, discussing cool ideas and topics that make you say, I kind of like that. It sets the scene, And
Is that non-committal reply when you're still trying to think of a response? I I believe in anime they call that thinking noises or listening noises. You're listening and considering.
Yeah. The next one is coming from Ben. This is a new user. I say new user, but it's a new interaction with our account. So I want to say thank you, and I hope you really are enjoying our shows. His comment is interesting to me. He says, "In my 20s, my friends and I would all road trip to Comic Con in Chicago. It means 5 hours of geeky talk and my best buds and no judgment, just honest opinions and how we felt about whatever topics we're landed on. Sci-Fi Revenant reminds me of those great conversations we had." That's pretty much what we do here. It's just those conversations that you have, when you're talking about your geeky stuff. So cool. Thank you so much to bringing the voice to the world, Ben, and Scuttlebutt podcast for your submissions. Thank you so much. We are not only appreciate the submissions, but we appreciate your engagement. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so let's move on to the next segment. We are Science Fiction Remnant.
This is the Funny Science Fiction Podcast.
We are the Caribbean Science Fiction Network.
We are Monorats.
We are One Accord Level 2 Podcast.
This is Jesse from Sudden But Inevitable and Open Pike Night.
This is Sci-Fi.
And on this segment, we just kind of point out the fact that we do have a hashtag. The hashtag is This Is Sci-Fi. As you know from previous shows, this is a hashtag that came out of a need. When I started the show, I wanted to have more engagement with the sci-fi community. And it was kind of hard to find the combined people to talk about all the geeky stuff when it comes to sci-fi. Obviously, I found a lot of, your typical, your Star Trek, your Star Wars, and all those secluded, unique groups and fandoms isolated in islands. But although I enjoy those IPs, I wanted to have a more broad conversation. So we started talking within the hashtag This Is Sci-Fi, and the engagement today has been amazing, and it's kind of close to what we wanted towards the beginning when I initially had the idea. So if you are a creator, a sci-fi creator of any kind, if you are a fan, you might want to just follow that hashtag. This is sci-fi, and a post. So far, the main thing that I have seen for this week on the hashtag is discovery, and that's the whole idea, where someone would find something that they will not normally be exposed to, and discover new things, new sci-fi. And this is kind of like the way for us to kind of share our sci-fi love. So I don't know, Ray, have you had any interaction? I don't know if you had any interaction this week. But...
I have, yeah. So one thing that the hashtag has brought to people's attention, and it's often something that you wouldn't otherwise know about, is that if there's a related IP that needs help from the fans, it's really hard to break through the walls of a fandom and get out to a wider community. And I think that the hashtag is really useful in that people who may not watch that show, but or watch it to the point of being a fan that follows the fandom, will get news about that show. Like, well, we all watch a lot of things and we all have our favorites, Alita. We watch a whole bunch of things, but we don't necessarily find out all the news and interesting stuff going on around those things. And the one that stuck out for me this week was the Orville Season 4 petition, which I'd like everybody to go and sign, because the Orville is fantastic. And watch it, enjoy it, follow it. If you're a dyed-in-the-wool, one-eyed Star Trek fan and you think the Orville is junk, you maybe need to, put the other eyeball back in and have a little bit of a look with 3D vision. But the Orville fills a need for that classic sci-fi adventure trope that sometimes feels like it's missing in recent Star Trek outings because the message is getting above the story sometimes, and the Orville is more like, yeah, let's just have Star Trek with sex and hookers, and booze. Just have fun. So I appreciate the Orville for that, and you don't have to think of it as Star Trek. It's its own thing, but the Orville needs a bit of help at the moment because the decision for another season is sort of teetering on the knife's edge. And this is the time where fan support is really important. Now, you may not be a dyed-in-the-wool fan, as I said. You may not have heard about the petition, but I highly recommend you go and sign that petition, even if you haven't watched the Orville yet. And the reason for that is because we need as wide a range of sci-fi IPs active and creating new content as we can get. If you let these things die off that are good but just aren't quite getting enough support to keep ticking over, then the whole genre is going to shrink. If the genre shrinks, people leave the genre because they can't find enough to keep them interested. And there'll be less for you to enjoy. When there's a hiatus in the things that you're interested in, say you're a dyed-in-the-wool Star Trek fan, we're doing okay at the moment. And I say we because I love Star Trek. But I remember in the early 2000s when they said, oh, everybody's burnt out on Star Trek. We're just not going to make any for 10 years. And I'm like, what?
Yes.
No! And that was like, trudging through the desert with an empty canteen for 10 years. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And even though you get people who are the classic Star Trek fans and the new Star Trek fans, and they're very much, they often don't cross over. It's all more content. The more content that's out there, the more you can find to be interested in. And as I've mentioned numerous times on the show, as you age, your thinking changes. I've given heaps of examples, so go back and listen to the rest of the season, and you'll pick those up. Blatant self-promotion there, but our thinking changes as we age. So if you watch something in 10 years time, you'll approach it differently because of your new experiences. You will have a different feeling about it. You may have completely flipped from the way you felt about it the first time you saw it, and that's important because sci-fi gives you a chance to think about the future. It gives you a chance to think about how you're interacting with your life. And if we have less content because these things will let die, then you'll have less opportunities to have that motivation to really look into your life and look into what you want to see in the future and help that stuff happen. Yeah. So I think that more sci-fi content, even if you don't like it now, is hugely important. So don't let these IPs die off. I think the Orville has a real place in sci-fi, and we should all support it and make sure that it continues for many seasons to come.
Well, if I could add to that,
Sure.
from a production point of view, when the Orville switched distribution platforms, they ended up having a tighter budget. And basically, they're fighting to prove to the people with money here in Hollywood that what they're producing is worth producing. So if you say no to Orville now, that could make, remember when that Orville didn't work? No, we're not going to throw money at this new science fiction idea. And it's going to make it harder for new science fiction of grand quality. Because name drop here, I actually worked a few episodes. I do background acting. And I was in season 1, I worked several episodes as a union actor, and I have not been brought back on because they're trying to save money desperately, and they're not hiring a lot of union background. They just go for the non-union. So it'd be really great to keep not only that show going, but also the potential shows that would come behind it as a success.
Exactly. If you let the genre shrink, it will continue to shrink.
Yes.
That's what we have to avoid.
So for all of you who are not familiar, you can actually If you follow our account, you'll probably see that petition. And you know how Twitter posts get buried, and you can just do a simple search within Twitter for the Orville petition, and it will come right up. We need help with season 4, so let's all join forces and get the Orville back on tracks. It's a great show, and I honestly, if you have never seen it before and you're listening to comments online, which I've seen some of negative comments on the show, especially coming from isolated IPs. Maybe I don't want to single out IPs, but were they saying this is not a real show? The show is amazing, and it's season 1 started as a comedy. Season 2, although it had very serious topics in it, and it got progressively more serious all the way to season 3 without letting go of the comedy. And I really, really appreciate that.
An interesting aside to that is that back in the sort of medieval days, the only person in the royal court who could actually say the truth to the face of the king was the court jester, and they did it through comedy. So that is sort of how I feel that the Orville's comedy works, in that they can take quite heavy topics, and because they're putting it through the lens of comedy, it's more digestible. Yeah. And people don't come out the other end feeling depressed or brought down by the heaviness of the topic, because that comedy was there to balance it out. So it's not a new phenomenon. Comedy's been used for hundreds, perhaps even over 1,000 years, to put heavy or truthful statements forward without people reacting badly to them.
Cool. Okay, so
where's those rails?
No.
Where's those rails? We're off the rails.
I like to think these rails were necessary. This derailment, let me say, was necessary. Okay, let's move on to the next topic.
Shout out.
And on this segment, we basically just want to shout out engagement from users as our way to thank the Twitter users, the community, the sci-fi community, for the engagement in our post, on retweeting or commenting or having conversations. This week I had great conversations about the topic of sci-fi, and I really, really appreciate that engagement. I would have to mention Manic, Pixie, Weirdo. Thank you so much for your support. It's greatly appreciated. And it's apparent. I don't get tired of saying that. Angelus, thank you so much for the engagement. You're always there. And there's always a joke going around where whenever I post the circles, he kind of falls from circle 1, and I just want to say, Angelus, you're always circle 1 to me, even if you're in circle 3. So thank you, Scuttlebutt Podcast, for the engagement. Ben, thank you so much. We really appreciate your engaging in the conversation. Thank you so much. Seldon Crisis. We have E. Lee Zimmerman. We got Sophie. Big Warehouse 13 fan. My people. Love that show. Heretical Sayyadina. We got Jade. Thank you so much for the engagement. Following Films, which we had the honor to have Following Films on our previous episode, so you can go ahead and download. And Beans, thank you so much to all of you for the engagement and the conversation. And let's keep it up. We love talking about sci-fi, so let's keep it going. In Good Pots, I really, really appreciate because you guys make it possible for us to climb the charts. So if we are number 1, it is because of you. So I would have to say thank you to Jade Culberson, Tim from the Funny Science Fiction Podcast, Antonio Palacios from the Cult Worthy Podcast, DT Carel from Space Castle. Thank you so much for rating us and making us your number one podcast in Good Pods. Okay, so we go to the next segment.
The outer remnant.
And not sure, I guess I should ask Chrisi if you have another podcast that you were invited to that, people that hear you here or hear you on your podcast, but they want to hear more of you.
Well, I had the fortune of running into the creator, writer, and mastermind behind the other audio drama, SciFi, Oz9. We met at a convention here in LA, a podcast movement in March, and she lost a cast member recently and asked me to step in for the role. So I have joined the cast. They, as of episode 74. So if you are starting from zero, there's still some amazing episodes to reach before I'm there. And yeah, I'm part of the regular cast now, and I'm very excited to be there. Oz 9 is another comedy audio drama. It is basically a a ragtag crew on a spaceship that really don't know what they're doing, and all the mayhem that happens to them as they're just trying to get by. And it's silly, absurd, and a lot of fun. And she's definitely a huge Doctor Who fan, definitely a huge of the British sci-fi. So you'll definitely get some of that influence in there as well.
My question is, do they have a cat that's evolved into a human being?
There is a robot zebra. Does that count?
That's different. I suppose so.
Awesome. So I guess I have another podcast that I'm going to add to my list.
But I do love Red Dwarf as well. Yes, I got your reference.
Awesome. And of course, you hear Ray's voice, and you're wondering, where have I heard that voice before?
Oh, where haven't I heard that?
Where have I heard Ray's voice before? It's somewhere, Alita.
Really?
So, go ahead, Ray.
I don't know that Chrisi would be aware of this, but I'm one of the hosts of the Alita Army live stream that's on every Saturday night around 5 p.m. US Eastern. But of course, it's a worldwide fandom, so it's near midnight in Europe, and it's a lovely early 7 a.m. in the morning down here in Australia at the moment. But of course, then your daylight saving ends and my daylight saving starts, and everything moves. So time zones are killer. But yeah, we actually didn't have one this week. It's the first time in about a year and a half because both of the hosts were busy. Angelus was working, and I got wifed. So we were short a host. And there's no show without punch. So it's very old meme, that one. But yeah, so we didn't have a show this week. But next week we're expecting to have a show on the topic of what part of the Alita story that hasn't been told yet are you desperate to find out about? And there's a couple of pinch points in the 30-year manga that have been hinted at but haven't been explained yet. So we'll be going over those and having our considered opinions about what those points might entail, and people bringing up what they're interested in finding out about next, because there are a couple of spots that Kishiro, the mangaka, he's written a lot of stuff, but it seems at the moment to have just sort of wandered off the rails, like somewhat like we do, and we're hoping he gets back to the main story soon. But I don't want to spoil it for people who are going to listen to that live stream or the recording that's of it that will be available on the Alita Army YouTube channel later. So check that one out. That will be happening on... Now, by the time this is released, it may have already happened. but that will be on Saturday, the 3rd of September. For that one, so check that out if you're at all interested in Alita Battle Angel or Battle Angel Alita the manga. I was going to say, Chrissy, have you seen Alita Battle Angel the movie?
No, not at all. I'm not familiar with it. No.
Oh my god!
Well,
What?
I have to fix that.
well, I would have to say, Chris, if you ever get to see that movie, reach out to me on Twitter. I want to know what your thought is. So far, everyone that have seen that movie so far, they love that movie as much as I do and want a part 2. So I'm really curious.
It has a 94% approval rating on what is the name of that silly site?
Rotten Tomatoes?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
But the name's got nothing to do with what it actually does.
I think it used to be like you throw Rotten Tomatoes at a performer who's doing a bad job, that sort of thing.
Ah, right.
So if they're green, you want to step away.
But yeah, the movie is severely lacking a sequel, and we as a fandom are doing everything we can to make that happen. And keeping the pilot light on, keeping people aware of it. It wasn't well advertised. So
when did it come out? What year did it come out?
2019.
Okay.
2019. It's well, you've obviously seen Avatar, right?
Yes, I was actually in grad school then. They made me see it.
Well,
I have thoughts.
If you can remember back to Avatar, James Cameron had the choice of doing Alita or Avatar, and he decided to do Avatar first as a test run for Alita, and then got hooked into Avatar. And so he handballed it to Robert Rodriguez, and who did a fantastic job of it. I highly recommend it. It is my favorite movie. I've seen it over 40 times now, 10 times in the cinema. And every time I find something new about it, it's that brilliant. So highly recommend you watch it.
Yeah,
and everybody listening.
Or you'll never let me back on the show again. I got it. No, that's good.
We wouldn't do that.
No,
I'd just be severely disappointed in you.
Awesome. So yeah, if you are a fan, as I am, help support the fandom. And
Me,
hopefully, and Ray too. Ray, he's a he's a tiny little fan. just a little bit. For all of you who are only listening to the podcast and not watching the video that comes out a month after, he's showing his great collection of Alita merchandise.
It lives behind.
Awesome. Okay, so should we jump in?
We're jumping in. Then I want to do the plot before we get too far into it, because we tend to wander off and forget about the plot.
Yes, please.
So I would like to get onto the plot now. I haven't tried to put this through the translators because I just don't think that's going to work nearly as well as it would have done otherwise. I'm still trying to find my image of the one for Alien. While I'm looking for that, why don't you explain what I'm talking about, Robert?
Well, on our Alien episode, Ray, and I tell you, I'll invite you guys to download that episode because it was just fun. Ray found a Chinese bootleg copy of the description.
Hong Kong bootleg back of the DVD case blurb about the movie. Well, I presume it was about the movie. It doesn't really remind me of Alien much at all.
It was so much fun, and we figured it was just put through translators. But I don't know. We have done that, and we have come to the conclusion that maybe someone just translated it really badly. And we have tried to replicate this as descriptions, but we can't find, that's as good as it gets. We're not going to get anything better than that one.
Yeah, it was amazing. I just, yeah, I'm still stunned to this day, and I can't find it. You're gonna have to go back and listen to our
That's
Alien
okay.
episode. We laughed for about 5 minutes. You'll just have 5 minutes of us cracking up.
Yeah, so just download that episode, and you'll get what we're talking about. It's just totally hilarious. So this movie, I was 15 when I saw this in the theaters, and I saw it. I've seen it many times. I actually owned a copy of each one of them, although we're only talking about the first one here. I was in high school when I saw it in the theaters, and it just felt me full of nostalgia. I'm sure this might not be the experience for everybody that have seen this movie, but from the music to the imagery and to the content of this movie, it's just all. I have nothing but love for this movie. It's the 1995 Back to the Future. And I wanted to ask you and see what your experience has to the both of you also. Um, Robert Zemeckis, I think he plays with your senses because I kind of notice in every movie that I've seen from him, the music, it's kind of like you have this little thing here just controlling you. Uh, it could be from the sound effects to, those little chords that he plays. Uh, you're familiar from like, for example, we talked about this in our episode for Ready Player One. This I didn't realize, but this is the first time that I actually noticed that. But at the time, I was so young, I couldn't really realize what was going on. And as I grow older and I rewatch this movie, I realize that although we know music plays a big part on a movie, it's just so cool how it is done in all his movies. Have you experienced that? Have you noticed that before? I guess I can start with Ray, and then we can move on to Chrissy.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm a big sci-fi soundtrack fan. I have had many of them. When I'm writing horror sci-fi, I listen to the Alien soundtracks. When I'm writing adventure sci-fi, I listen to Back to the Future or something like that. The audio is so endemic of the actual genre. It just draws it out of you. It's fantastic. And the best movie soundtracks are the ones that you don't even notice when you're in the cinema watching the movie. It's just part of the whole package. But then whenever you hear it later on, it immediately pulls the amazing parts of the plot and visuals that you saw back to the forefront of your mind. It just draws it out like it's linked with the red thread of fate. It's just so fantastic when the music is so iconic and yet fits so well to the story that you don't even notice it while you're watching the movie. But then when you hear it later on, it's just bam, it's all there. It's great. A great connection between the audio and the full experience.
It's crazy, but because it could be just 2 or 3 chords. That's it. Well placed. That's it. It's you don't. I didn't realize this, but it just it controls you. It's like What do you think, Chrissy? I don't know. When was the first time you saw this movie? If you can recall.
Yeah, you asked me what is your favorite sci-fi, and this comes to mind without even a hesitation. And what I love about it is the fact that most people think sci-fi, they're going to expect like spaceships or aliens. It's like, no, guess what? Back to the Future counts. And I was 13, and it was the very first movie I saw more than once in the theater. My mother chastised me for wasting my money because you already saw that movie. But I going to the sound design, outside of just the music, think about that opening scene. We've got this really bold design for the actual Back to the Future, the logo coming across with no music behind it.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely those clocks and the clocks start ticking, and you start kind of the fade in, and you're seeing the panning across all of those, and the more clocks that they see, the more they start pounding in your head, and it's like, this is a movie about time. And we're going to start you with it where that's all you're looking at. You're not hearing any music, you're not hearing any dialogue. You're just seeing names coming up and clocks, which I love that. You'd want to expect like Back to the Future, bam, and here it comes at you, but no, it's not. And then to outside of the score, I think about, and this is just true of the era of music in the 80s in film, is that they wrote songs for the movies that the songs were appearing in. Nowadays you've got whoever is the maybe the distribution company or the production company will see, okay, what artist is in our stable and what are the titles that we can pull from and that will fit what we're doing. But back in the 80s, and Back to the Future is definitely an example with Huey Lewis and the News.
Oh, yes.
That music was written for that movie. Power of Love, Back in Time. And, of course, Huey kind of screwed the pooch when he said no to Ghostbusters. They did their version of I Want a New Drug, and they were going to do it as the Ghostbusters theme. And he's like, I don't want to be in a movie. And wow, that was a mistake. So he
Yeah.
jumped on this one. And I mean, you can't divorce Huey Lewis and the News from this movie. It is 100% part of that whole, even though it's different than the score and it's the rock music, it's all brings it together.
I would have to say that I will never record myself watching this movie because it's embarrassing how I stand up and dance.
Right?
I
my
just-
goodness.
I can't stop. And
Do you
scream.
fanboy?
No, but I do scream the song. I don't sing the song. I scream the song. So I don't know if that counts.
Let's just say that in the shower last night, I was doing my own rendition.
There you go.
I still remember all of Huey Lewis's movements from the video, and I act them out like with this microphone. Oh God, I was such a geek.
That's impressive.
Nice.
Yeah, that was why this movie, again, it's like I had a total like young teenager celebrity crush on Michael J. Fox. He was plastered across all my walls, every Tiger Beat magazine I bought. And then Huey Lewis in the News. I liked Huey Lewis before this movie came out. So it's like, Chrisi, we're making this movie for you. It has everything you love. So it is absolutely the most perfect movie for me.
One question that I always had, because I like to say that I am partial to this movie because, I was 15 at the time. I was in high school at the time. And everything is like, it was me. The music is the type of music that I listen to. Everything just was me, and I love sci-fi, and I always loved time travel stories. But I wonder, for someone outside that era, if you're listening to this episode and you were outside this era and you still love this movie, I like to hear your thoughts, because for me, it's very hard to speak outside of it because I lived it. But there's a lot of fans to this movie that were not from this era, and I think that speaks not only to the production but also to the story that this movie has.
Well, I would definitely say that. I'm sorry. I was thinking
Okay.
about how Bob Gale, when he was first pitching this movie, the whole concept started when he was looking at one of his friend's dad's yearbook from the 50s and said, wouldn't it be funny if you went to high school with your parents? So I think that
No.
transcends era. Oh, I'd be interested to see what they were like, because my mother was a total like smoker. But don't you? I ever catch you with a cigarette? Very much. I think we could all relate to the relationships and to the people. So I think you don't have to be either a teenager from the 80s or anything to understand that concept of imagining your own parents at that age, whenever that age would be for you.
I would
That-
break if my mother came on to me. That would just like snap.
That is a hard thing.
You think
That-
you're all that? Do you think she'd really be attracted to you? I mean, really?
Well, if my grandfather hit me with the car, then
There you go.
maybe, but otherwise no.
Yeah, I would have to say that part was was a tiny little cringy to me.
Oh, the peeping Tom.
That was hilarious.
Well,
My
you know
dad's a
that's
peeping
why
Tom.
Disney kept turning this down. I mean, the script was like rejected something like 40 plus times. And Disney turned it away because they said of the incest because the mother was attracted to the son. So that they're like that doesn't fit with our brand and they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like
I don't
when you
know that
watch
you
it
could-
it's like come on.
I don't know that you could call it incest when
Right?
they're not aware.
Exactly.
And they've never lived with each other at that. Well, he's lived with her, but not that her, the
Yeah.
older her. So I don't see that it fits into the incest bucket really. It just,
But
Yeah, I
that was
don't
the excuse that they gave Zemeckis, I guess.
Disney
I think it was a hard
excuses. Yeah, I'm
topic and
used
they
to
didn't want to
that.
deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, true enough.
Maybe it's all
It's-
like, you know.
Skirted the issue, and that was enough for them to go nope.
Yeah.
Nope, Phil.
And I really like how they played it in the story, which makes me wonder if that was real, would it really happen in that manner, where she actually got around to kiss him. She noticed right away something strange. He said, "Well, kissing you is like, what was it?" He said, "Kissing
My brother.
my brother."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I like how they really played that. Because to that point, I was just like, oh, no, she's going to kiss. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because you could see right away from her face expressions as she's actually kissing him. I always wonder if that, maybe, I tend to overthink things a lot. But during that scene, as many times as I've seen that scene, I always wonder in time travel, if time travel is real and that happened for real, could it be that scenario that plays if you kiss your grandparents, for example?
Not both of them, just your grandmother. If you
Well,
like.
yeah, well, either,
Threesome with your grandparents? Okay.
That's a new kink.
yeah.
I honestly don't think that if you're not aware how, I'm adopted. So I was adopted at birth and raised by people who are not my blood relations. And so realistically, any of my, brother or my cousins or whatever, there is no actual blood relation. But it's how you were raised. It's socially. It's like there would be no way, but on the flip side, if I found out years later, I have an uncle who is 4 years older than me. So realistically, a believable age range to date someone, how would I know? How would I know that he was actually a blood relation? I think that was just a fun device for the movie. I don't know if it's based in science or biology.
I'm really
It's
glad
not.
because it actually
Right?
really plays well into the story, and it makes
It does.
it's because you're expecting it's kind of like in those horror movies, and they're hyping you up to the climax, and then you get to there and it's like, oh, okay. And that's how it felt to me, where the cringe level was increasing, and when it got to that, it's like, oh, okay. It just
I
played
have
really nice.
I have a theory.
Mhm.
When the camera flips to behind her and he's sitting there going like this, that's how her brother would react if she tried to kiss her brother. Her brother would go.
Sure.
So maybe it was just the positioning of the lips that made it feel like it was a brother, not any sort of sixth sense or anything like that.
Well, I was just speaking from a biological perspective, but Ray, you know me. I overthink things, so
You're allowed.
It's a comedy. It was funny.
it was a lot of fun. It
was really well written. I mean, that the little hints that they dropped around the place, and the payoffs for the jokes, like Uncle Joey,
Oh yes.
who never
Adios to them bars, kid.
he failed his parole hearing again, and she throws the cake on the table. Well, we just have to eat this cake because he's not out again. And then yeah, the scene where he cries whenever we let him out of the bath. Let's just leave him in there. And it's just like, get used to the virus, kid.
I really appreciate that. It's like, yeah, he keeps on crying, so we just leave him there.
You know, comedy falls flat when there isn't a decent payoff, and every little bit of comedy that they set up in this thing is paid off so well. Even to the point, you know, where he's saying goodbye to them after his parents have got together. He says, "Oh, by the way, if you guys have kids," and they sort of go, "Oh," if you guys have kids, and one of them, when he's 8, sets fire to the rug, go easy on him. And it's like, that is horrifically specific. It's like, where did that come from? It's just beautiful.
Well, comedy-wise, I think some of my favorite moments, and this actually plays into the podcast that I write, because, you know, I've got a modern person in the past. I love when Marty knows things about the future and nobody believes him. Or they're like, what street is that? Wait, no, that's John F. Kennedy Drive. Who the hell is John F. Kennedy? You know, they don't know yet. It's 1955. Or, of course, the whole bit with Ronald Reagan, the actor. You know, I love those kinds of jokes.
That
got
was
this
beautiful.
Like inside thing.
Who's the vice president? Jerry Lewis?
It paid off again because a portable TV studio. No wonder your president needs to be a good actor.
Yes. And that's pretty true, actually.
Makes perfect sense.
Oh, wow.
But they do, you're talking about the subtle hints, is that one of the things when he first arrives in downtown Hill Valley in the 50s, when they're sweeping across all of the different storefronts, they land on the poster for the Ronald Reagan Barbara Stanwyck movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pull over and you see on the marquee, they're saying R. Reagan. It's like, so it's setting us up for, the actor. So it's well thought out.
Well, a lot of people, when Ronald Reagan became president, they didn't even realize he was an actor. Like, unless you go into his background.
Well, he was the governor of California here in the 60s, so he'd been doing the politics for quite some time.
Yeah, well, people would have known him as a politician, but they may not have known him as an actor because, I mean, he was big when he was out, but, you know, people come and go, and without an internet, you can't look this stuff up.
Yeah, it would have been a lot different if there was, Twitter or Facebook or any of those.
We really do not appreciate how accessible information is today. And kids who, you know, grew up where the internet was here all the time don't appreciate what they've got because they never didn't have it. I remember going. Well, I'm 53. Yeah, they're kids these days. But we had like Encyclopedia Britannica and World Book. We had both of them, and that's where you went.
And they were always like way out of print. So there's like, oh, well, this was true in 1972. Great.
We used to get the yearbooks as well with the updates, but you look something up in the main book and then you go, okay, now is there an update in one of these over here? I have no clue.
I had a couple of those.
Folks really appreciate the internet. Professor Google is fucking awesome. I gotta say. And YouTube as well. The other day, the trigger on our Dyson handheld, battery vacuum cleaner, carked it, and it's out of warranty now. And I'm like, how am I going to fix this thing? Go to YouTube, find a video. Common problem: the trigger snaps in the middle. This is how you dismantle it. And I'm still waiting for the extension Torx. It's a number 8 Torx screw extension because I got to get down into the handle. Once I've got that, I'm going to freaking finish rebuilding the thing. But in 1985, there's none of that. You couldn't find out how to do this. Well, there wasn't, handheld battery vacuum cleaners either, but there was stuff that needed fixing. And unless you knew somebody who knew how to fix it, you were stuffed. I mean, they sold manuals on how to repair cars. Yes, kids, you could actually, change your own oil and spark plugs and stuff like that. But not anymore. But yeah, if you needed to fix something, you had to find a book. If you can't
Although
find a book,
there
you
is
were
a
stuffed.
good point in the movie where, so we feel like Marty is the more knowledgeable because he's from the current period. But do you remember that brief little moment where he's talking to his dad and he's trying to get the top off of that soda bottle?
Yep.
Because in
Yeah.
the 80s, you could just twist them off with your hand. And just the idea of like, hey, you stupid kid, you don't even know this because back in my day, we couldn't just rip them off with our hands. And he just basically
Mhm.
just goes over, pops it off with the actual opener and moves on like it's no big deal. But yeah, that's kind of the equivalent of kids these days getting the internet and we not having it. It's a different life experience.
I
Well,
find that
it's
really interesting.
contextual knowledge. It's
Yeah.
contextual knowledge. So you've got to have the knowledge in the context of the period.
I find that really interesting because in this movie, you get to see, you know how it is from your parents' perspective. So you get a firsthand view of, and in many occasions, like one of them said, aside from the soda pop, one of the scenarios that I
Did
can
you
point
just
out.
open a soda pop over there, Ray? I just heard that. Well
it a
I should have
played,
muted
sir.
my
Well
mic,
played.
shouldn't I?
Is it a Coke? Is it a Coke?
Is it a
I'm a
Pepsi free? It's a Pepsi free?
No, it's Pepsi Max, which is no sugar. But anyway, yeah, I'm a Pepsi boy.
I'm a Coke person.
This has more caffeine. I'm sorry, I have to give it the caffeine.
So one of the things that I can point out about this movie is like when he is playing that heavy rock and roll and he finishes and he looks around and everybody's just like in shock. And it's like, don't worry, your kids will love it. So it plays out into the generation gap between that generation and the generation where he came from.
Mhm.
And I kind of appreciate that. It gives you like a firsthand view of what might have been like for your parents. Do you notice that? I mean, I'm just pointing out
For sure.
two points on the movie, but the movie is just litter with it.
But the phone call that the guy who had the sore hand was having when he said, "Hey, you know how you're looking for that new sound?" And he holds the phone out and goes, "Check this out." And I think that his brother is actually the guy who released the song.
Yeah,
that
Chuck
he's
Berry.
playing.
So he was Marvin Berry. And
Yeah.
he's like, "This is your your cousin, Marvin Berry." It's like, okay, we got the joke. Thank you.
Exactly. But it's beautifully done. And I just wanted to go on a generalization of time travel stories for a second and talk about why do time travel stories keep coming up in sci-fi? What is the attraction of time travel? This is actually the third time travel story that we're doing this season already.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you realize? We did Doctor Who, then we did Safety Not Guaranteed, and now we're on Back to the Future. So time travel is one of those things you either love or hate. I know people who love sci-fi, they hate time travel. I said, no, that doesn't work. You can't possibly do that. Blah, 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 blah. But I think that people are really interested in time travel because you hear stories from older people or you read them or what have you, and you're always wondering what it was like to be in that time and how it differs from now. And a lot of people can't extrapolate far enough to get out of their own shoes, as it were, in the time zone to or their era, to think about what it was like in a different era. And then these movies explore what that's like, but also, oh God, you've gone back in time and you've screwed things up, and now you've got to try and fix them. So you've got, in a story, you've always got to have that drama. You've got to have that thing that's gone horribly wrong, and you've got to find some way to fix it. And that's what really attracts people to stories, is watching people struggle and succeed in just a very generalized sense. But then when you want to make it interesting and you throw time travel into the mix, then it gets really interesting. It's like, oh my God, I've managed to erase myself. It's like, oh, shit, that was a mistake. So, I think lots of people are interested in, my father told me all these stories about when he was young. I wonder what it was really like, because I'm sure these have been edited, because now he's older, he's not going to admit to all the things he did. And, the mother was all, you shouldn't drink, and you shouldn't this, and you shouldn't that. And I never went and chased a boy. And
what is the comment that he said? I swear my mom was born a nun.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have trouble with the time travel because we can't logically explain it because it's not real. Like, there's a lot of sci-fi that you can suspend your disbelief, or there's enough science being presented to you that, yes, this world can exist this way. But with all of the paradoxes of time travel, it's just your mind will just blow up if you try to argue about the feasibility of it really happening. Because one of the things, this happened even back when I was 13 watching this movie, when Marty comes home and we get that nice introduction to the family that has been changed by the events that he has just put in motion. I always thought, does that mean all of his memories of his childhood are wrong because they did not happen with these people? Think of the family vacations, or the burn, or setting fire to the rug at age 8. I bet he didn't in this world, because it's totally different people. So I was always like, does that mean he doesn't really connect to his family anymore because they're not like on the same like memory? Like, this upset me as a 13-year-old.
I can see that you and Robert overthink things almost as much as I do.
Ray knows me. He knows that I'm bottling it up. I split my friends when I talk about time travel, because half of them agree with me and half of them disagree with me. How I start a conversation in this is, Marty never came back home. In any of those movies, he never came back home. And here's my explanation. In time travel, and you guys could disagree. In time travel, I'm a strong believer that your decisions impact your reality. So we are time travelers right now. We just move forward in time. We can't move backwards in time. So if you, for example, are on the way, you get out of the house and you have a choice. Choice number choice number 1 would be, you got to go to work. Choice number 2, I got to stop at Starbucks first and then go to work. Say, for example, you choose number 2.
Choice number 3, blow it off and go to the beach.
There you go. So right now you split. There's a universe where you went straight to work. And now you are on the universe where you go to Starbucks first and then go to work. You don't know if there was going to be an accident on the way, where in universe number 1, that causes you to die. But you're in universe number 2, where you are alive because of the derail that you did by going into Starbucks, gave you time enough for that accident to happen. So by the time you got there was nothing going on. So I strongly believe in multi-universe. So to me, time travel is the ability to travel from one universe to the other. And that's the reason why I said Marty never went home, because when he went back in time, he created a fork. He created a universe where his dad was a loser and a universe where his dad was successful. And he followed that universe where he was successful. So the original universe where he came from is where his dad was, basically a loser. But that's what I think. So that allows me to think that anything in time travel is possible, including going back, which is a normal paradox that people talk about, when you can go back in time to kill your grandparent. I think you'll still be alive, but you're in another universe. But that's just how I think. What do you think about that? I know Ray has heard me talk about this in our, and I'm sure most of the listeners, so I know what Ray's going to say, but I want to go and get your
Do you?
opinion.
What do you think I'm going to say?
Well, I have gone in the future, so I'm back from the future.
Aren't you? We're all time travelers at the rate of 1 second per second. So, but yeah, accelerating or decelerating, that is quite complicated. What I was actually going to say was you really need to watch Steins Gate.
Yes.
Because basically everything you said in the last 3 minutes is in Steins Gate. So you will really enjoy it. For you, Chrisi, Steins Gate is a time travel world. I would call it a world line anime where they keep changing the past and then things get different, but only one person can remember it all because he's the one who's doing the traveling. And it's really complicated. And the main character, they say you have to kill your beloved, your loves when you're a writer. This guy didn't die, but he went through hell. And I think that Robert's going to, be with his empathy, he's going to be suffering a little bit, but it's worth it in the end. It's not like he goes through it for nothing, unlike that poor bastard in Upgrade. Screwed. Yeah. But yeah. So check out Steins Gate if you like. One, anime, two, time travel, but in relation to this story, there is a huge number of paradoxes, and it was interesting how in the photograph the eldest child disappeared first, then the second eldest, and then Marty was the last one to start vanishing. I found that a really good mechanic in building up the tension. It wasn't just like, and everything's different. It sort of worked through in a wave rather than just suddenly all changing.
Christy, have you ever heard about that theory of the multiverse and how I explained it?
Yeah, I have, and I just think under the context of this movie, it goes to Mystery Science Theater. This is just a TV show. We really should relax. Like, I don't think they thought that much about it because they took liberties, like the photograph. In my opinion, when the kiss finally happens and all the kids pop back into the picture, we're restored. Why are they still wearing the same clothes?
Exactly. That's what I was asking myself.
Wouldn't they have nicer clothes? Of course, that would tip the ending, and we don't want to do that because that is a writing device, a film device, not a seriously discussing this as science device.
Well, they were wearing, like, the older sister was wearing the high school graduation T-shirt, so that wouldn't change.
But she was really kind of schlubby because, in that her first timeline, she was the one who couldn't get a date, and she was kind of down and out. So I think she probably would have been dressed a little nicer, or at least standing a little.
Not necessarily. She was dressed nicely because she was going out to work or wherever in the morning, but those were her relaxing clothes when that picture was taken, and that wouldn't necessarily change.
Okay, I'll buy that.
I can see both points. I mean, although in my explanation that wouldn't necessarily work, but one of the great things about this movie is the fact that this is just fun. It's just a fun movie.
We're happy because not only does it change their lives, finding out his parents had a great life, they're really really connected, whereas early on they're like, they're your parents, them, what do they like to do together? And his response is nothing. And because she fell in love with him under the guise of this Florence Nightingale effect, so she never really was in love with him. She was just kind of swept into that, and that they built a life on. So Marty facilitates them being able to fall in love with actual connection, so which then in turn makes Marty's life better. And so it's really a great happy ending because now he's kind of learned from everything, and I shouldn't be so afraid to put my music out there. And if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I think it's just a great happy ending.
I like
Except
the
except for the
perspective.
Marty, you gotta come back to the future with me. What happened to us? We turned into assholes? No, Marty, you're fine. We gotta do something about your kids.
But your girlfriend turns into Elizabeth's shoe. We're not going to discuss it, but that's what happened.
Yeah, that's a hush hush, you know. But you know, I have to say, Chrissy, I like your perspective. I don't think I ever seen it in this way before. Um, Based on what you just said about Marty's parents, in the beginning of the movie, you could see how, you know, in her face, you know, she's drinking. You could tell that she is not quite happy with her life.
No.
And she, in a way, I felt like she was kind of pushing, or what's the word that I'm looking for? She's trying to convince herself
Yeah.
that this is her best life.
Really, her best day was that day they fell in love, and she's just been reliving that. I mean, you look at the daughter who's like, "You've told us this a million times. You went to the fish under the sea dance, you know?"
It was enchantment under the sea.
Whatever.
Uh, but yeah, I you know, I really have not thought about it from that perspective, but it's very evident that when we get to see them again, they're truly in love. This is not her trying to, you know, convince herself that she has the greatest life. Now they do love each other. And I think that's how the rest of their life unraveled in a different way where now they're successful.
Yeah, and it's great that that George gets the confidence he needs through this interaction with Marty, and he publishes this book and all those things. And of course, we all love what happens to Biff. That's the best.
Oh yeah.
We all want to see our bullies get that kind of an end.
Well, the whole thing was that he wasn't just bullying Marty's dad, George. George was being bullied pretty badly, but I think he was pushing everybody around, and nobody had the guts to stand up to him.
Yeah.
And once George stood up to him and laid him out, that was the moment where everything really changed, because he went from being the class clown, the butt of everybody's jokes, to people saying, "Why don't you run for class president?" and shit like this. And that just changed his trajectory completely.
Well, that's a really good point. Like, we only, of course, focus on the McFly family here, but imagine all the kids who were being bullied by Biff up until that moment, how their lives played out differently for the better.
Yeah.
Except for maybe his henchmen. But I think Billy Zane did okay. He did okay.
Another thing that I actually was thinking about is when I watched this movie in my rewatch, not my original one. The DeLorean. It's supposed to be an electric car in 1985. And I find that to be really cool. Have you noticed that? I mean, obviously, it didn't make the electric car sound, because every time he revs up the engine, you can hear it. But you know, we hear from the very beginning when Marty asks, you know, when he's putting the plutonium, it's like, is it running in plutonium? No, it's just an electric car, but it needs a little kick to make it go to, you know, to the
little.
Yeah, a little kick, just a little bit plutonium. I found that to be really interesting, considering that DeLorean, it's not going to release an electric car until 2024, I believe. Which, by the way, that car is beautiful. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I invite you to look it up and just Google it. DeLorean. You could Google DeLorean 2022 because they made the announcements already. But the car is amazing, and it's following all its iconic, you know, like the doors and the iconic look that comes to, but yet very futuristic. I think they're following, because you know, their format, because if you notice in 1985 that car was futuristic. That was like At least that's my perception. When I saw that car for the first time, it was just like, wow. And, they always had the 1985, 1986 versions of that car. So I think they're following on their footsteps by the new redesign that is coming up in 2024, being that futuristic. Have you, yeah, there you go. For all of you who are listening, you can't really appreciate, but Ray has actually found a photo of the differences between the two DeLoreans.
It
and
kind
the
of
new-
looks like a DeLorean and Kit from Knight Rider had a baby.
Yes.
I was thinking about a McLaren, actually. The one on the right. The front looks quite McLaren-ish.
Yeah, that's true. So the reason why I brought that up is because that DeLorean in the movie is supposed to be electric, yet the one that's coming up is going to be fully electric. Have you?
Well, let me ask, because I'm not a car person, and you guys probably know a lot about this. They say in Back to the Future that it has the stainless steel construction, which is what allows it to be a time machine. Is that conducive to an electric car? A stainless steel body? Is that heavy?
Well, the car was heavy, and I don't know, Ray. I'm gonna start off, but you can join in. The car is heavy, but I think the look was is a design for to have a car that it's never painted. So if you notice, if you looked at any DeLorean, the car doesn't need any paint. That's just how it's designed, and it also doesn't dent. And I think that's the formula that Tesla was following up in the design for their Cybertruck, where it's supposed to be the same kind of outside design. It's also very, very rigid. But I mean, I don't know. Have you heard anything, Ray, on that design?
No, I hadn't realized that DeLorean was still a thing. I heard that they were in a lot of trouble in the early 2000s. So I didn't know that they were still producing. So,
well, as a matter of fact, I find this to be hilarious because I remember it was in, let me see, 2008, I think. 2008, we had a DeLorean store in a city about 30 minutes away from me, where you can go there, you can look at their cars, and you can buy one if you want. It could be used or apparently new. They only had one here, and I think one in Texas. If I might be wrong in here, but they only had two, and one of them was really close to me. And why I said I find it funny is because when you go to a dealership, you have the 2022 model, and if we have the 2021s, and we trying to get rid of them, but when I used to go to the DeLorean place, they only have the 1985 and 1986 version in 2008, and that's all they sold. So when you go to the website, I remember, if you want to order it from the website, 1985, 1986. So they never had like a yearly car like any other manufacturer. And they're
pretty small, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're not a big manufacturer.
Exactly, and they still produce the parts. So if you had a car that you bought back in like 1986, you can still find the parts going by to the website.
Well, the fact that the car was so futuristic in 85, you don't really need to update it every year because it's still ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Here in Los Angeles, we're kind of known for having a lot of variety of high-end cars you don't see in a lot of other cities because there's just so much money pouring into the industry here. And I have periodically seen more than one DeLorean out on the road, just driving to work, whatever. That is still, people are still buying them. People are still wanting that part of their life.
Hey, I have a question for you. Do real DeLoreans sound like the Millennium Falcon, like the one in the movie?
And they don't have those boosters on the back. It's strange. Almost didn't recognize it.
They weren't actually boosters. They were exhaust ports for the nuclear reactor.
That sounds terribly dangerous.
Well, it's just a little kick, you know. He said he needed a little kick.
It's just 1.21 gigawatts, just a little.
So yeah, I just found that interesting that now we finally going to see an electric DeLorean, and I am really excited. I just told my wife today, I gotta buy one. You know, we have
just as an aside, I can't remember where I heard this. I know I heard it somewhere, and I can't pull up a reference for it, but I heard it might have been on a podcast. It might have been something. I remember it. I remember it being audio, but they were saying that there are more electric cars on the road than fuel powered cars in 1900.
interesting.
And in 1901 or something like that, an electric car won an endurance event against petrol powered cars. It's like, what? I've never heard any of this. So I don't know if that's kosher, but that's what they were saying, that the electric cars have been around for a long time. It's just that the batteries were always the problem.
I think there was also a big push from the petrol companies to, I mean, that's definitely Los Angeles does not have very good public transportation because they wanted us to be a car city, so that we would be spending the money on gas and the vehicles.
The number of American cities that had their tram systems ripped out through shady deals from petrol companies and car companies, it just boggles the mind. I mean, America is stated as the land of the free, but it's the land of the free if you've got the money. So
the free enterprise.
Yes, exactly. You just put the enterprise as silent. But if you've got the money and you want something done, you grease the wheels and you get it done, and to the point of hamstringing your public transport to make sure everybody's driving a car, which is amazing.
Chrisi, there is a documentary out there I remember seeing a while back. It was a 2006 documentary called "Who Killed the Electric Car." That speak to what you're mentioning, how the petrol companies, it wasn't in their best interests, and even today, if you think about it, and I don't know if you own an electric car or if you know anyone that has an electric car, but even today you hear things, people tell you like, I heard, dude, you got to be careful with your car. I heard the batteries explode. Or you live in Florida, man, that battery or that heat, man, you be careful. I suggest you change it. And you hear all those things and you're like, where are they hearing these things? And it's not far to believe that maybe those people have gone to a dealership and they got convinced into buying a car when they're saying that, even me, myself, I remember a while back prior to buying my electric car, I was in a Chevy dealership and the guy was telling me not to buy it, that, it's not a good thing. And, he was putting all these things. So it wouldn't surprise me that there's somewhat an agenda, not necessarily, well, it's kind of hard to be not to believe that it's coming from the big petrol companies, but there's also that personal that immediate involvement that people in the market have, like car dealerships that maybe sell regular cars. They are not going to make money if they don't sell, so they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they sell so they can make their money.
There have been many incidences throughout the history of business where new technologies have destroyed the old businesses, and that's what they're afraid of.
I love that we've gone down a path now of conspiracy theories. So sci-fi conspiracies.
Well, it's not a conspiracy. It's documented fact.
Well, yeah.
Perfect example is printing. When the printing press came into being and books were suddenly available, at a reasonable price, and people other than the aristocracy could actually afford them, all those monks who sat there copying out texts forever and ever lost that job. Like, besides illuminating the text of the Bible, they didn't get to do any other books because it was all done on a printing press, and that business was just gone.
Well,
There
that's
was
what's
just no point in it
interesting
anymore.
about War of the Worlds. Briefly touch on this for the Orson Welles. We have believed in our collective consciousness that that Americans freaked out when they heard it, believing it was real, people jumping to their deaths. That was all fabricated by the newspapers who were trying to discredit radio and trying to see radio is bad. That's technology we should stay away from. Buy our newspapers instead. So yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, there's a lot of disinformation out there.
Yeah.
If I could give our listeners one piece of advice, do not believe anything on the first instance. You've got the internet now. Go and look it up and try and find corroborating content and just dig into it. You'll be amazed at the number of things that you will discover that are wrong. And they've been continually wrong for quite some time. Perfect example is how taste is taught in biology. You open any biology textbook, they'll talk about the different areas of the tongue having receptors for different tastes. It's bullshit. In fact, you've got taste buds running all the way down your esophagus, which is why when you throw up a little bit, you can taste it at the bottom of your esophagus because you've got taste buds down there. But
Yummy.
It's not taught. It's wrong. If you go and actually look at medical papers, you'll actually find that what they teach in basic biology about taste is completely wrong. It's been known to be completely wrong for 100 years.
Oh my!
But it's still taught like that.
So Chrisi, I'd like to welcome you to Science Fiction Remnant for the second time. This is what we do. This is what we're known for. We talk about the thoughts within the movie.
We've lost the plot because I still haven't given you the plot.
Oh, everybody knows the plot.
Do they? But I like doing the plot.
Yeah, we typically do the plot at the beginning of the show. And I think we're 3 shows in now where we completely forget about the plot. Is that true? Sometimes we did it.
A lot of people talk about this movie, I mean, especially like the behind the scenes or the like unknown facts. Like people love this movie so much; those resources are all out there. So I'm having fun that we're branching off into other areas that maybe aren't like covered everywhere else.
We can't help ourselves. See, because we've thought about it too much, we've made all these connections to other things, and that's probably what makes the show, really.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Ray, what do you think about the use of plutonium?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was going to cover some of this in the science behind science fiction.
Okay,
but yeah,
so we'll leave it for the end.
For that. Yes, leave it for the end.
I just that's one of the things. I'll wait for it. It's one of the questions that I have.
I've got the plot here. I could fill in with that instead.
Let's see. How big is that? The plot do you have?
It's 4 paragraphs.
Okay.
It's just the plot straight off the wiki is what I normally do.
Let's go ahead only because we always do it. So people are expected to hear it. So just go for it.
It just helps if they haven't seen it for a while. Okay. In 1985, teenager Marty McFly lives in Hill Valley, California, with his depressed alcoholic mother, Lorraine, his older siblings who are professional and social failures, and his meek father, George, who is bullied by his supervisor, Biff Tannen. After Marty's band is rejected from a music audition, he confides in his girlfriend, Jennifer Parker, that he fears becoming like his parents despite his ambitions. That night, Marty meets his eccentric scientist friend, Emmett Doc Brown, in the Twin Pines Mall parking lot. Doc unveils a time machine built from a modified DeLorean powered by plutonium he swindled from Libyan terrorists, because that's where I get my plutonium from. After Doc inputs the destination time of November 5th, 1955, the day he first conceived of the time travel invention, the terrorists arrive unexpectedly and gun Doc down. Marty flees in the DeLorean, inadvertently activating the time travel when he reaches 88 miles per hour, which is 142 kilometers per hour. I have driven that fast once, and my God, it was fast. So I don't recommend it in a parking lot.
You should be on the LA freeway. I mean, that's like that's the average you go here.
Oh, the autobahns, yeah, that's like slow. But yeah.
I have gotten to 114. I would not repeat that again.
No, I was driving a Toyota Celica in early 2000s, and I got it up to about 155 kilometers an hour at 3 a.m. on the M4 in Sydney. There's no other cars around. There was nobody was there. Nothing in the tail light, in the rear vision mirror, nothing out ahead of me. And I just went, let's see how fast this sucker can go. And it was really fast. I mean, I would not do that in a car park. It was just insane. Which is probably why Marty crashed into so many things. He was going too fast. Arriving in 1955, Marty discovers he has no plutonium to return. While exploring the burgeoning hill valley, Marty encounters his teenage father and discovers Biff was bullying George even back then. George falls into the path of an oncoming car while spying on a teenage Lorraine changing clothes, and Marty is knocked unconscious while saving him. He wakes to find himself tended by Lorraine, who becomes infatuated with him. Oh my God. That was one of the cringy elements of this movie. Marty tracks down and convinces a younger Doc that he's from the future, and Doc explains the only source available for 1955 capable of generating the power required for time travel is a lightning bolt. Marty shows Doc a flyer from the future and that documents the upcoming lightning strike on the town's courthouse. As Marty's siblings begin to fade from a photo he's carrying with him, Doc realizes that Marty's actions are altering the future and jeopardizing his existence. Lorraine was supposed to tend to George instead of Marty after the car accident. Early attempts to get his parents acquainted fail, and Lorraine's infatuation with Marty deepens. This is because Marty basically has to save himself from Biff several times, and in doing so, is super cool. Lorraine asks Marty to the school dance, and he plots to feign inappropriate advances on her, allowing George to intervene and rescue her. But the plan goes awry when Biff's gang locks Marty in the trunk of the performing band's car, while Biff forces himself onto Lorraine. George arrives expecting to find Marty, but is assaulted by Biff. After Biff hurts Lorraine, an enraged George knocks him unconscious and escorts the grateful Lorraine to the dance. The band frees Marty from the car, but the lead guitarist's hand is injured in the process, and Marty takes his place, performing while George and Lorraine share their first kiss. With the future no longer in jeopardy, Marty heads to the courthouse to meet Doc. Doc discovers a letter from Marty warning him of the future and destroys it, worried about the consequences. To save Doc, Marty recalibrates the DeLorean to return 10 minutes before he left the future. He really should have given himself a little more time. 10 minutes was like, bullshit. Because he was in the middle of town, not at the Twin Pines Mall site. So,
you know, he was counting on using the car, but you got to plan ahead.
That car really just dying all the time.
If he hadn't stopped to look around and just driven there, he'd be fine.
Yeah, he shouldn't have taken his foot off the accelerator. The revs dropped too low and it carked itself. Okay. The lightning strikes, sending Marty back to 1985, but the DeLorean breaks down, forcing Marty to run back to the mall. He arrives as Doc is being shot. While Marty grieves at his side, Doc sits up, revealing that he pieced Marty's note back together and wore a bulletproof vest, like he didn't get shot in the face. He takes Marty home and departs for 2015 in the DeLorean. Marty wakes up the next morning to discover his father is now a confident and successful science fiction author. His mother is fit and happy. His siblings are successful. And Biff is a servile valet in George's employ. As Marty reunites with Jennifer, Doc suddenly reappears in the DeLorean, insisting that they return with him to the future to save their children from terrible fates. And you get the iconic line, roads. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And they go zap, 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 off to the future. Roll credits.
It's so iconic.
It is.
And every time I don't get tired. Every time I watch this movie, I watch it today again, and it's just an iconic movie.
That's me cosplaying Doc Brown.
For all of you who are listening to the pod and not watching the video, there is a photo of Ray as Doc Brown. It's hilarious.
It is. That was my Facebook profile picture for a while.
We should post it on Twitter.
Feel free. I'll send it to you. I'm happy to be publicly shamed. It's all right. I've been doing it for years.
Awesome. So, yeah, like I was gonna say, this movie is a total classic. It's just, you know, I just get full of nostalgic feelings. But then again, you know, like I said at the beginning of the show, I lived the era. So not 1955, just to be clear.
I was going to say, did you time traveled recently?
The 80s. So yeah, this movie, every time I see it, I'm just, you know, I make it really, I dance, I sing, it's just an amazing movie. Okay, so another photo from Ray here for our listeners out there. There's a meme, and I'll let you go ahead and.
There are many Christopher Lloyd time travel memes, and this one's particularly interesting because it covers quite the breadth of the science fiction community. But this meme states, Christopher Lloyd, the only actor to ever had 2 time machines stolen from him, referring to the DeLorean and the Bird of Prey that were used in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, that was used to time travel back to pick up the whales. So, spoilers for Star Trek. But if you haven't seen those movies yet, what's wrong with you? But yeah, Christopher Lloyd played, I can't remember the Klingon's name. It wasn't Kang. It was, but he was the captain in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. He was the captain of the Bird of Prey that was chasing Kirk around and tried to steal the Enterprise. The remote control setup Enterprise with the very lacking crew over the what was the name of the planet?
I think it was a Commander Cruge. I haven't seen this movie in a while.
Yeah, I've got the same problem. But so he was the Klingon captain, and I loved it when I first saw The Search for Spock and went, oh, that's Doc Brown.
He played such a great Klingon with his eyes, you know. Awesome.
But Christopher Lloyd is a fantastic actor. He can ham it up but still be respectable, which is a real skill. And I got to say that Leah Thompson, who played Marty's mother, when she was in her normal mode, because she obviously had makeup on to look older for 1985, when she was in her normal mode, looking very attractive, I've got to say, the acting chops that she showed in her attraction to him, you could just see it on her face. She was enamored with Marty, and it was just fantastic acting. It totally blew me away. You don't see it these days. You don't see character actors who, with a look, convey everything that you need to know about how that character's feeling. Yeah, and she did it fantastically in this movie.
Yeah, I think I had that conversation with my wife. It's like, that's not how her real voice is, right? It's like, well, that's a real voice. It's just it's changed for the scene, and it's so well done. I do agree with you, Ray. We don't see that often. That level in movies nowadays.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story. She talks about when she was dressed up in the 1980s Lorraine makeup. She actually went home to surprise her grandmother, and her grandmother's oh my, because they did such a good job of aging her up to essentially be like practically her own mother's age.
Oh wow.
I think they did a really good job. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about makeup,
Mhm.
they were subtle. All of the like not only George Lorraine, Biff, and Doc Brown, but even the principal. I think they did a real good. Geez, didn't that guy ever have hair? But he gave him a little ring, and then he had some of the crow's feet and stuff. And I think that they did a subtle enough job that it didn't distract from you. And I think they did a good job on that.
One thing that I noticed, and maybe it's just me, so if you guys tell me that you thought the same way, then I'll feel better. But Doc Brown, to me, looked exactly the same, 1955 and 1985.
Well, he had longer, crazier hair because time had happened, and I still have my own hair.
Yes, that was beautiful.
I don't know if that was maybe part of the joke of the movie, but it was just hilarious to me. It's like, well, that guy never,
And this is a funny, I think, thing now looking at it all these years later, 30 plus from 85, is seeing how those actors actually have aged.
Yeah.
And how they have changed over the years. And honestly, I was able to work on set one day with Leah Thompson. She directs now as well as performs, and she was doing an episode of the Goldbergs, directing and starring in it. And she definitely has the first Lorraine's shape now. She's not, of course, an alcoholic and very worn down, but I think that's something that I think people forget, that women age that way, because she had been a professional dancer back when, she was in her 20s. She didn't go on any further with it because her legs were too short, I think, is the story was that she just couldn't make it as a full-on dancer. So she turned to acting. So she had, of course, an amazing, very athletic body. But women age, and that's okay. And still think she is, a beautiful woman, and I'm glad to see. It's like we kind of laugh at like, oh, what is she going to turn out like? But yeah, that is how a woman's body ages. So I thought that was good. And Crispin Glover, I got to see a talk he gave about 10 years ago now. So what would have been probably 30 years after this movie. And yeah, and I think he actually still looks pretty good too.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's kind of a funny perspective to be able to have that extra time has passed.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a friend a while back, watching this movie, and he said, "Oh, it's Doc Brown still around? I mean, he was old for this movie." It's like,
No.
not really. He wasn't really old. It's just the makeup. He's still alive. It's like, really?
I know
But he doesn't have his
reaching.
hair.
I know we're reaching out of the first movie into the second one, but I thought it was really cool when he came back to 1985 looking at the age of 85, and then they went to the future, and then he just peeled the stuff off his face like, oh yeah, I did a facial regeneration, but I didn't want you to freak out. And he looked the same age as 1955. It's like, what?
Awesome. So, do we have any? I'm not sure if seems like we reached the end. Do we have any final thoughts? Anything that you want to bring up on this movie?
This movie is really the opening act of the greater story, which is so well written. Like I said, that this movie is well written in that it sets up and pays off so many great pieces of humor and touching moments, and that gives you those feelings of, yeah, they succeeded. He's made his life better, and congratulations, well done. And you think it's all over, but it's not. And so, and at the very end, they head off to the future, which brings up the second movie, let alone the third one, which is completely out there. But the way this is written for the setups and payoffs, and then you watch the second one and you start seeing where the setups for the humor in the first one come into the second one. The writing is just fantastic. It's got such a depth and so many layers to it, and the fact that they reuse Hill Valley 3 times, and you've got that fresh painted sort of I wouldn't say lackadaisical, but it's sort of that naivety of the 50s. The war's over and now we're just going to make everything nice and fluffy and pretend that nothing bad ever happens in America, and make it all fresh and pleasant and everything. It looks that way, but there's all the bullying and everything still going on. And then you go to 1985, which has got the drunk lying on the papers and and the all the like the evangelical church that's taken over the cinema, which he ran into, and
the movie theater was like I don't know if you noticed, it had like it was like a XXX adult.
No, that was a different one, but yeah, there was an adult store and all this sort of stuff, which is not 1955 at all. He knew, hey, look, there's an adult store. I know it's 1985. Yay, I'm home. Oh. But and, broken down cars with the wheels missing, and the whole 85 schlock thing, of almost dystopia going on in America, in the small town, which you wouldn't expect. But there it was. And then when you go to the future, you've got the cinema's back, and it's a cinema again, and it's got the 3D, Jaws 27 with the 3D shark coming up and sort of munching people that are walking past the cinema and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the writing in this and the way they put it together was just brilliantly done. And I highly recommend, oftentimes you get a movie, Matrix, where you watch the first one and it's so good, it just anything that follows ruins it. But this is not one of those movies. This is a movie that plays so hard into the sequels, and they work so well together that you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't watched the entire trilogy.
Well, I think one of my favorite little bit ditties is when he's about to go into the future and he says, I'll go to 30 years from now. That's a good, nice round number. And he's like, I want to see who wins the 30 World Series. And then in the second movie, they kept referencing that the Chicago Cubs had won the 2015 World Series. And that's the big joke because, of course, they've always been the losers. And as a Cubs fan myself, they actually won the next year. They won in 2016. And if you go to Universal Studios, so they still have a character actor walking around as Doc Brown at the Universal Studios theme park. And you can ask him about that. You say, what's going on? That was a year off. And he gives a whole explanation. Like, these actors are trained to give a whole explanation why. Well, you see, the way that the world shifted and things, and that's why the Cubs won in 2016 instead of 2015. As a Cubs fan, I love that to death.
It's beautiful when a plan comes together.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie, and it has a very special place in my heart every time I watch it, and I still have a playlist based on all the music in here, and the music by itself brings me back to my 80s days. But the movie was amazing, and everything about this movie is just I love it. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I own all copies of the movies. So,
nostalgia is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
My wife loves to go to the local trash and treasure auction, so we go over there every Saturday and look through all the lots, and then she bids on them the following day online. But that's not the point of this story. The point of this story is that they had a radio going in, because it's like a warehouse, small warehouse, and you go through and check out all the lots, and there's usually 1,500 to 2,000 lots, and it's all sorts of random stuff from all sorts of time periods, and there's a lot of deceased estates where people have been hanging on to things for half their life and all this sort of stuff. So you find all sorts of little treasures and older furniture and all this sort of stuff. So all these things that remind you of the past. And then they put on the radio station that does the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And when we were there midday on Saturday, which of course is earlier for us than it is for you because I'm in the future. Hi. Because as we're
I've been
recording
told
now,
that you can give me the lottery numbers. Is that true?
oh Jesus
That's
Christ!
what I was told.
Know?
I mean, I just a scratchers or something, you know.
Gian is not here, so someone had to do it.
Representation. Yeah, representation. Moving on. So it was the 80s. They were playing the 80s, and Power of Love came on.
Oh yeah.
And all these other songs from the 80s, like Culture Club, Love Is Love, and just so many songs that I remember listening to hundreds of times in the 80s and meant so much to me. And that nostalgia switch just went click. And I'm like, oh my God, so nostalgic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how the music of your teens stays with you for your entire life and just means so much to you. And yeah, there was a lot of bad things about the 80s. The Cold War sucked ass, but the music was fantastic.
Yeah.
Can't go past it.
Awesome. So this brings a conclusion to this episode, and I really want to thank Chrisi for coming on.
We're not doing
Thank
the
you
last
for
segment?
having me. This was so much fun.
It's amazing. I have so much fun. I hope we could do another episode, and we can bring you out to the show. So thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks, guys.
Did you not want to do the last segment?
Is there's another segment?
Oh, there is a segment. Okay, so let's move on to the next segment.
He forgot it. He forgot it, everybody. He missed it out.
Well, you know what it is like I did ask you pre-show, but I completely forgot because when you think about this movie, it is so much fun, and you don't really think that there would be like a science in it. And for all of you who have listened to our episodes, there have been some episodes where we cover a movie that doesn't really have much, so it's always a little hard to come up to actually have that segment. But we always, I actually thank Ray for always delivering. Thank you for that.
No worries.
Okay.
The science in sci-fi.
I'm an over talker. Especially about Alita, but I'm a trained scientist with 20 years experience in university science teaching. So I always have something to say about science. There's always something interesting. Science is one of those things that you can make connections across topics, across genres, from physics to chemistry to biology. And it is amazing. It's an amazing field of study. And if you don't get too bogged down in the minutiae, you can have a really good time talking about science. So you actually asked me a question earlier, and we're going to cover it now.
Yes.
Do you remember what that question was, Robert?
Plutonium.
Can
The
you put
little little kick? Just a little kick for the
kick. Can you get a little vial of plutonium and stick it into something that's, the size of a industrial vacuum cleaner and get 1.21? I'm going to say gigawatts because that's what it actually is. But in the universe of Back to the Future, it's gigawatts. No, you can't.
What?
I know. Shocking, isn't it? The more shocking thing is that, I'm still waiting for the Mr. Fusion. I really need one of those.
If Mr. Coffee make it, we got to talk to them.
Yeah. Oh, man, I would love something you just, chuck a half a discarded beer and a banana peel and an aluminium can into and get 1.21.
Oh, my God. We'd have the oceans cleaned in a year, people.
Oh,
Wouldn't we?
yes.
Wouldn't
Oh,
we?
yes.
Oh my God. So the big problem is the physical property of energy cannot be created. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. So you can turn matter into energy and energy into matter, but it takes a lot of I have to say it takes a lot of energy to create to do that. It's a very complicated field, and chemistry and physics are still struggling with it. But I suspect that, I shouldn't suspect that, because all our listeners are incredibly intelligent, obviously. So they would all know that the way that electricity is generated from nuclear power to this day is no different from how it's generated from coal or hydroelectric or water power. It's all done the same way, even wind, and it's all got to do with magnets and spinning magnets, creating electric field and creating that pulse which creates electricity. And even nuclear power is generated through turbines. So the radiation is released from the nuclear material. It heats up the water boils, the boiled water expands, it pushes through the turbine, and the spinning creates the electricity. So even to this day, we don't have a way of converting a small amount of plutonium into power that we can utilize. If you turn it into a bomb, you can release a lot of energy very quickly, but it's completely uncontrolled. So you've got no way of collecting it and using it in anything useful, like a flux capacitor. It would just blow the car to smithereens and everything within, several kilometers. And then you'd have a radioactive wasteland at that spot for thousands of years. So there is no way to turn a small amount of plutonium into a huge amount of power that is hugely useful. That being the issue, they would have really needed to do it over a longer period and stored it in a capacitor. So if you don't know what a capacitor is, it's a device that stores electricity slowly until it builds up to its full charge and it releases it suddenly. So generally, we don't generate a huge amount of power if we need a huge amount of power suddenly. We generate it slowly because most of our technology for generating power is a slow method, and you store it up until you've got the huge amount of power you need, the 1.21 gigawatts, and then you release it suddenly. So that would be a more logical current technology way of doing it. And I'm not poo-pooing the movie. You've got to suspend disbelief, certainly for time travel, but the method of the mechanics of the time travel, because I could be wrong. Somebody could have invented time travel and I just don't know about it yet. There's the old meme of what do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? It's irrelevant. Because if time travel is ever invented, either in the future or now, people will be able to travel forward and backwards in time, and therefore it won't matter when it was invented. Everybody will get access to it theoretically.
But Ray, I like to make an invitation to all the time travelers listening to the show. You're invited. So
yeah, please come on and tell us how you did it, because
Yes.
we're interested. You can be our star guest from whichever year in the future you manage to swing that. But getting back to the whole point of 1.21 gigawatts of electricity, lightning bolts do not have a standard electrical charge. Depending on, well, I'll take a step back. Lightning is static electricity. If you've ever run your feet across the carpet and then pointed your finger at the bare skin of your sibling and zapped them, that is basically a tiny lightning bolt.
Insight into your childhood there.
Yes.
Were you the receiver or the the receivee?
Have you ever opened your car door and put your foot on the ground and got zapped? That is a tiny, tiny, tiny lightning bolt. So basically, that's how lightning is generated. You have a difference in potential between the clouds, which are rubbing together and doing the whole static charge thing and building up electricity, and the ground. And it's an interesting fact that lightning actually goes up from the ground to the sky. It just looks like it's going down. But the whole thing about lightning is that it varies from, you know, the couple of volts or couple of watts that you can generate by rubbing your feet on the carpet, up to and surpassing 1.21 gigawatts of power from a lightning bolt. Now, we are yet to generate to create a technology that I know of that can capture and store lightning. It's just so much power that it burns the crap out of everything. As I said before, a capacitor is designed to take things in slowly and then release them quickly. We don't have a technology yet that can take things up quickly and then release them slowly, because you get such a huge thump from lightning that it melts things, trees, people, what have you. There was a couple of interesting little factoids that Professor Google gave me. So a gigawatt is equal to 1 billion watts. It's rather a lot. Most of us are familiar with what a watt is. A light bulb in our homes are typically between 60 and 100 watts, although, you know, complex fluorescence and all those sorts of low energy bulbs now, you're actually looking at 6 to 15 watts. So
Wow.
6 to 15 watts versus 1.3 billion.
It's a lot of light bulbs.
It's a lot of light bulbs. So 1.21 gigawatts would power more than 10 million light bulbs, or one fictional flux capacitor in a time travel DeLorean. This is what it actually says on Google. So they're leaning right into it.
Nice.
And another one here is a lightning bolt 1.21 gigawatts. And while lightning strikes vary in strength, Doc Brown was right. They can produce 1.21 gigawatts of power. That's a sobering fact, considering that lightning is Utah's second deadliest natural hazard and has been for the last 15 years, according to the Utah government. So apparently in Utah, you can get struck by lightning quite regularly.
And of course, the irony is that California doesn't see much lightning storms at all, and that's where the movie was set.
That's why they needed the flyer, because they had no hope otherwise. Interesting ideas. So obviously, the time travel circuit required a huge thump of power, but electric cars, again, working slightly differently, don't require large volumes of power suddenly. They again require small amounts regularly to drive the electric motor, which then turns the wheels. So something like a nuclear reactor in your car that could produce 1.21 gigawatts like that would just blow your car to kingdom come. It wouldn't power your car. Stick with the batteries. No, they don't tend to burst into flames. Don't believe those rumors. But stick with your car, lithium car batteries and the other technologies that they're working on more recently. And don't go for the nuclear reactor option. It's not recommended for a lot of reasons, including Libyan terrorists.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I managed to resist the urge to talk about four degrees of freedom and movement in time travel stories.
Well done. I know that taken a lot, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
You have to travel in time and space. Come on.
Well, let me not go there.
No, don't go there. If you want to know about that discussion, go and check out the end of our episode on safety not guaranteed.
Yeah, we had following films for that episode. So this is it. Thank you so much for being with us for another episode. We really appreciate you listening and for the interactions. And Chrisi, thank you so much for being here again. Um, if can you go ahead and tell our listeners again where where they can find you?
Sure. My podcast is an audio drama, Madison on the Air. It is a comedy and it is about time travel. So,
Yes.
although that's really not the main crux of it, it's just kind of the device to get us there. But Madison on the Air, and that is we're available on pretty much every podcast platform at Madison on the Air on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want to chat, I'll be there.
And for all of you, my excuse is I listen to it because it's time travel, and you won't change my mind. Thank you again. Thank you so much for coming back to our show, and I hope you come back for other episodes because we had a lot of fun. This was a fun
Love
movie.
you guys. Thank you.
There are so many time travel movies out there. We could do one a week and not run out of content for
Yeah.
a couple of years, I'm sure.
That's definitely true. Again, thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.